My name is Vernon. I never thought my life would take such a sharp turn, all because of one dinner. Looking back now, I realized that night wasn't the beginning of my problems. It was just the moment I could no longer ignore them. Rachel, my wife, had invited me to a dinner with her family. It wasn't unusual. They hosted events often, but I had learned over the years that my presence wasn't exactly valued. Her father, an old-school businessman, never hid his disappointment that his daughter had married someone ordinary. Her mother, obsessed with appearances, barely acknowledged me unless it was to correct something about my manners or clothing. And her brother, Elliot, well, let's just say he treated me more like a guest than family, even after years of marriage. I had been hesitant to go, but Rachel insisted. "It's important," she said that morning. "I need you there tonight." So I went. I put on my best suit, made sure I looked presentable, and convinced myself that maybe this time, things would be different. But the moment we arrived at the upscale restaurant, I knew something was off. The atmosphere was elegant, filled with quiet conversations and soft music. I followed Rachel to the private dining area where her family was already seated at a long table, drinking wine, laughing like they were in their own little world. I pulled out a chair next to Rachel, but before I could sit, she placed a hand on my arm. "Oh, you're over there," she said, gesturing toward a smaller round table near the corner. I frowned, confused. At that table sat her young nephews and a few preteens, all absorbed in their tablets or making a mess with their food. I let out a small, awkward laugh. "You're joking, right?" Rachel didn't even blink. "No, Vernon." We ran out of room at the main table. I glanced at the long table again. Empty chairs. Several of them. I wasn't imagining things. Her father sipped his wine, her mother avoided my gaze, and Elliot smirked as if this was some private joke. Something in my chest tightened. I swallowed hard. I wasn't just being separated from the group. I was being humiliated. Rachel had made a decision, one that told me exactly where I stood in her life. And I understood, in that moment, that I wasn't really her partner. I was a decoration. A formality. I took a slow breath, nodding slightly as if I accepted it. But inside, something was shifting. I straightened my tie, turned around, and walked out of the restaurant. Not a single person called after me. Not Rachel. Not her father. No one. I got in my car, turned off my phone, and just drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere but there. Hours later, when I finally parked in a quiet lot by the water, I turned my phone back on. And that's when I saw it. Missed calls. Dozens of them. Messages piling up. Rachel. Her mother. Even Elliot. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Why were they suddenly so desperate to reach me? And why did I have this sinking feeling that something far bigger was happening, something I had unknowingly set in motion the moment I walked away? I sat in my car, staring at my phone screen as missed call after missed call rolled in. The messages were piling up, each one more frantic than the last. "Rachel, Vernon, where are you? Rachel, call me. Right now. Rachel, this isn't funny. We need to talk." Her mother, "Vernon, please answer. It's urgent." Elliot, "Dude, you need to pick up your phone. Now." I felt nothing. No anger, no anxiety, not even curiosity. Just emptiness. For years, I had swallowed my pride for Rachel, convincing myself that the way her family treated me didn't matter. That the comments, the dismissiveness, the subtle digs, none of it was important as long as she loved me. But that dinner had shattered the illusion. Rachel had made a choice. She could have stopped them. She could have spoken up. Instead, she looked me in the eyes and told me to sit with the children like I was some unwanted guest at my own wife's family gathering. And now, suddenly, they all needed me? I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes, exhaling slowly. The night air was cool, the sound of distant waves filling the silence in my car. I should have felt relief, maybe even satisfaction. But all I felt was a slow-burning realization. I had spent years trying to be accepted by people who never once saw me as an equal. And that was over. I picked up my phone and, for the first time that night, I responded. "Me. Why?" It took less than 10 seconds for my phone to ring. "Rachel." I let it go to voicemail. A second later, another call. This time from her mother. Then Elliot. I finally answered when Rachel called again, keeping my voice calm. "What do you want?" "Vernon, where are you?" Her voice was sharp, urgent. "Out," I said flatly. "Listen, you need to come back. Right now." I let out a dry laugh. "Back to what?" "The kids' table." "Vernon, this isn't a joke." She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Just come home. Please." The desperation in her tone sent a chill through me. Rachel never begged. What happened? I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Silence. I could hear muffled voices in the background, hushed and frantic. Then she finally spoke. I'll tell you when you get here. Just come home, okay? I wasn't sure why, but my gut told me that whatever was happening, it wasn't about me. Something had gone wrong after I left. And I was about to find out exactly what. I pulled into our driveway nearly an hour later, my headlights casting long shadows across the front of our house. The moment I stepped out of the car, I knew something was off. The lights were on in nearly every room, and through the front window, I saw figures moving frantically. I barely had time to process it before the door swung open, and Rachel was standing there, looking pale and shaken. Vernon, she breathed out, her shoulders sagging with relief. Thank God. I frowned. What's going on? She hesitated, her lips parting. But before she could say a word, another voice cut through the night. Where the hell have you been? Elliot. He was standing in the foyer, arms crossed, eyes burning with anger. Something about the way he looked at me, like I was the problem, made my stomach twist. I stepped inside, scanning the room. Rachel's parents were there too, sitting stiffly on the couch. Her mother looked like she had been crying. Her father was gripping a glass of whiskey like it was the only thing keeping him together. I turned back to Rachel. Somebody want to explain what's going on? Rachel swallowed hard. After you left, something happened at the restaurant. I waited. She wouldn't look me in the eyes. Just tell him, Elliot snapped. Rachel finally met my gaze. It's about my father, she whispered. I looked over at him, my confusion deepening. The man who had spent years looking down on me, making me feel like I was never good enough, now looked afraid. What about him? I asked. Rachel took a slow breath. Someone exposed something about him at the restaurant. Something serious. Something that could ruin him. And they did it right after you left. My blood ran cold. She kept talking, her voice shaking. Vernon, they think it was you. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy as everyone stared at me. Rachel's father clutched his whiskey glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Her mother dabbed at her eyes with a trembling hand. And Elliot was glaring at me like he wanted to throw a punch. I slowly crossed my arms, keeping my voice steady. Let me get this straight. You think I did something to your father? Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Not me, but others. They think it was too much of a coincidence. You stormed out, and minutes later, someone exposed, she stopped, as if the words themselves were dangerous. I glanced at her father. The powerful, arrogant man who had spent years making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage now looked small, vulnerable. He didn't meet my gaze. I exhaled slowly. Exposed what? Rachel? Elliot scoffed. Oh, come on, don't act like you don't know. I turned sharply toward him. I don't know. Maybe if someone actually told me instead of assuming I have telepathic powers, we'd get somewhere. Rachel hesitated, then finally spoke. It was an email. My brow furrowed. An email. She nodded. A bunch of people at the restaurant, strangers, even some staff, got an anonymous email at the same time. They opened it on their phones and started whispering, looking at Dad. Then someone stood up and read it out loud. I waited, my pulse quickening. Rachel clenched her jaw. It was proof that my father has been involved in something illegal. Really illegal. I stared at her, absorbing the words. Illegal how? I asked carefully. She didn't answer. Instead, her mother let out a choked sob. Elliot took a step forward, his voice low and venomous. Insider trading. I blinked. Of all the things I expected, that wasn't it. I glanced at Rachel's father again, searching his face for a reaction. He was still staring at his drink, jaw clenched. Not denying it. Not arguing. Holy hell. I let out a slow breath. And you think I did this? Rachel shook her head. It's just that the timing. The timing is bad, yeah, I cut in. But why would I do something like that? I don't care about your father's business. I don't even know how I would have gotten proof of anything like that. Rachel looked away. Elliot didn't. You had plenty of reasons, he muttered. I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, really? Enlighten me. He stepped closer, voice dropping low. You've never fit in with this family. You've hated how Dad treated you. Maybe you finally snapped. I clenched my fists. That's insane. Is it? He tilted his head. You stormed out of that restaurant humiliated. Then, right after, boom, Dad's life explodes. What are the chances of that? I exhaled through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. I walked out because I was sick of being treated like garbage. I didn't do this. Rachel's mother whimpered, shaking her head. It was so public. I turned to Rachel. You believe me, right? She hesitated. It was a small hesitation, a flicker of doubt, and that was enough. A slow, sinking realization settled in my chest. She wasn't on my side. She wasn't against me, not yet. But she wasn't defending me either. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. Rachel, I love you. But if you really think I had anything to do with this, then you don't know me at all. She closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. I need to know the truth. I laughed bitterly. You already do. Elliot scoffed. Yeah? Then prove it. Tell us where you were after you left. I narrowed my eyes at him. What? Your alibi. His expression was smug. If you had nothing to do with this, tell us exactly where you went. My stomach twisted. Not because I was guilty, but because I knew what it looked like. I had turned off my phone. I had driven for hours without a destination. I had sat alone in a dark parking lot by the water, staring at my reflection in the windshield, trying to figure out how my life had turned into this. No receipts. No witnesses. No proof. I had walked out of that restaurant and disappeared into the night. And now I was a man without an alibi. Rachel's eyes searched mine. Vernon. I could feel them closing in. Not physically, but emotionally. The weight of their suspicion pressing down on me, suffocating me. I straightened my shoulders. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to explain myself to people who had never once treated me as an equal. I met Rachel's gaze, my voice steady. I guess you'll just have to trust me. She swallowed hard. Vernon. But before she could say anything else, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number. Something about it made my stomach tighten. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. You should be careful who you trust. The line went dead. The room spun. I slowly lowered the phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. Rachel's face twisted in confusion. Who was that? I swallowed hard. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. Someone had set me up, and I had no idea who. Silence wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. My fingers tightened around the phone, my mind racing to make sense of the voice I had just heard. You should be careful who you trust. Rachel stepped closer, her brows furrowed. Who was it? I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had built my life with, the woman I had loved through every storm, now staring at me like she wasn't sure if she knew me at all. My gut twisted. I don't know, I said slowly. They didn't say their name. Elliot scoffed. Oh, how convenient. I shot him a glare. Believe what you want, Elliot, but that call wasn't random. Rachel crossed her arms, worry flickering across her face. What did they say? I hesitated. Something about repeating those words felt dangerous. Like acknowledging them would make them real. They told me to be careful who I trust. Rachel's mother let out a shaky breath. Her father stayed silent, gripping his whiskey glass like it was the only thing keeping him together. Elliot sneered. Yeah, right? Sounds like a setup to me, probably one of your little tricks to throw us off. I turned to him, my patience running razor thin. What the hell would I gain from this, Elliot? He shrugged. Revenge? Payback? Maybe you wanted to humiliate Dad the way you think he humiliated you. I felt my jaw clench. If I stayed here one more second, I might say something I'd regret. I'm done, I muttered, shoving my phone into my pocket. I came back to see what the emergency was, and now I know. But I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated by a guy who spent years looking down on me. I turned to Rachel. If you want to talk, really talk, call me. But not until you figure out whose side you're on. Pain flickered across her face, but she didn't stop me as I walked toward the door. Elliot, however, wasn't finished. That's right. Run away. Just like you did at dinner. I stopped in my tracks, my fist curling. I turned slowly. You really think I did this, don't you? He smirked. I know you did. I stepped closer until we were inches apart, my voice calm but firm. Then prove it. His smirk faltered. That's what I thought, I said, shaking my head. I walked out without another word. The night air was cold, sharp against my skin as I climbed into my car. My hands gripped the wheel, but I didn't start the engine. I needed to think. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone had timed it perfectly, knowing I'd leave the dinner and take the blame for what happened next. But who? I thought about the people at that table. Rachel's father, powerful but arrogant. Her mother, fragile and silent. Elliot, always eager to see me fail. And Rachel. A sick feeling coiled in my gut. Was she in on this? I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the thought away. No, she wouldn't do that to me. Would she? My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. My breath hitched as I answered. Who is this? Static crackled on the other end. Then, a voice. Low. Distorted. You don't get it yet, do you? I felt my pulse in my throat. What do you want? A short chuckle. I already got what I wanted. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. Someone was watching me. Someone was pulling the strings. And if I didn't figure out who, I was about to lose everything. I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The words from that call echoed in my head. I already got what I wanted. What the hell did that mean? I looked around the dimly lit street, scanning for anything suspicious. A car that didn't belong, someone watching from the shadows, but there was nothing. Just the eerie stillness of the night. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to ruin me. They were toying with me. I couldn't go home, not yet. My mind was a tangled mess of questions, and the idea of stepping inside the house, pretending everything was fine, made my stomach churn. Instead, I drove. Not to any specific place, just anywhere that let me think. My headlights cut through the darkness as I replayed every detail of the night in my mind. The dinner, the humiliation, the anonymous email, the timing. Who had access to that kind of information? And more importantly, who hated me enough to use it? I had my suspicions. Elliot was an easy candidate. He had always treated me like a nuisance. But was he really capable of something this calculated? Rachel's father? Maybe. If he thought I was a problem, he had the power to erase me. But would he go as far as framing me? And then, there was Rachel. I gritted my teeth, hating myself for even considering it. Rachel and I had built a life together. A real life. I had been there for her through everything, her career struggles, her family drama, her insecurities. Would she really betray me like this? Or had I been blind all along? At some point, I found myself parked outside an old diner on the outskirts of town. It was mostly empty, save for a tired-looking waitress and a couple of truckers nursing their coffee. I walked inside, the bell above the door jingling, and took a seat in the farthest booth. A waitress came over, her voice flat. Coffee. I nodded. Yeah, black. She poured it without another word and walked off. I stared down at the steaming cup, my reflection distorted in the dark liquid. Rachel hadn't called me again. That should have told me everything. If she really believed I was innocent, she would be trying to find me, trying to fix this. But instead, she had let me walk away. And that was when I knew something had changed between us. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness ground me, and pulled out my phone. I hesitated, then typed out a single message to Rachel. Me, do you really think I did this? I set the phone down and waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. Nothing. I let out a slow breath, my hands curling into fists. Then, just as I was about to give up, my phone vibrated. Rachel, I don't know what to think anymore. A sharp pain lanced through my chest. That was worse than an accusation. Worse than outright anger. She was doubting me, which meant I had already lost. I leaned back in the booth, exhaling slowly. This was it. The moment I had spent years ignoring. Rachel's family had never accepted me. And now? Neither had she. I was alone. I didn't realize how much time had passed until the diner door opened again, letting in a cold gust of air. I glanced up and froze. Standing there, looking right at me, was a man I had never seen before. Tall, dark coat, hands tucked in his pockets. But what sent ice through my veins was his expression. Because he knew me. And he wasn't surprised to see me. He walked toward my booth, slid into the seat across from me like we were old friends, and smiled. Vernon, right? My pulse pounded. I didn't answer. His smile didn't waver. Don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you. I swallowed hard. Then why are you here? He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. To tell you the truth. I stared at the man sitting across from me, my mind racing. His presence felt deliberate, calculated, like he had been waiting for me. The diner's fluorescent lights cast deep shadows under his eyes, but his expression remained eerily calm. He was studying me just as much as I was studying him. I finally found my voice. Who the hell are you? He leaned back, stretching his arms across the booth. Just someone who knows more than you do. My pulse spiked. More about what? He tilted his head slightly, as if debating how much to say. Let's start with what you know. You walked out of that restaurant humiliated, right? A few minutes later, an email was sent to everyone in the building, exposing your father-in-law's dirty laundry. And now, everyone thinks you did it. I clenched my jaw. I didn't. His lips quirked in a small, knowing smile. I know. Something about the way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. I gripped the edge of the table. If you know I didn't do it, then who did? He exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers against the table. That's the part that gets tricky. I narrowed my eyes. Try me. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right. First, you need to understand one thing. This was planned. Every part of it. Someone wanted you humiliated, and then they wanted your father-in-law to go down. But more than that, they wanted you to take the fall. I swallowed hard. Who? His expression darkened. You're asking the wrong question. I frowned. What does that mean? He leaned forward slightly. You need to stop asking who and start asking why. I shook my head, frustration mounting. That doesn't make sense. Why would someone frame me? I'm nobody. I don't have enemies. Hell, I barely even have friends outside of Rachel's circle. The man smiled faintly. That's exactly why you were the perfect target. A cold pit formed in my stomach. I thought back to the dinner, to the way Rachel had casually dismissed me, the way her family had ignored me. I had always been invisible to them. And now, I was expendable. I swallowed, my voice tight. What are you saying? That someone wanted me out of the way. His gaze didn't waver. I'm saying someone needed you gone. My breath hitched. Rachel? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. I hesitated, then picked it up, unfolding it slowly. It was a printed email. The same email that had been sent out at the restaurant. But something was different. At the very top, in small, barely noticeable text, was the sender's name. My blood turned ice. It wasn't some anonymous hacker. It wasn't Elliot. It wasn't even me. It was an email address I recognized. Rachel's. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. No. That can't be right. The man tilted his head. Can't it? I shook my head violently. Rachel wouldn't. She wouldn't do this. She. The words caught in my throat. Wouldn't she? She had humiliated me in front of her family without a second thought. She had doubted me the second things got complicated. And she hadn't called me once after I left. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart pounding. She set me up, I whispered. The man gave me a slow nod. Looks that way. I forced myself to breathe. But why? His lips pressed into a thin line. That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. I sat back, running a hand over my face. My mind was spinning, the ground beneath me shifting. Rachel had done this. But for what? To frame me? To ruin me? Or? A sick realization clawed at my chest. Or was I just collateral damage? The email had destroyed her father, not me. I looked up at the man, my voice raw. Was this ever really about me? His expression was unreadable. Now you're asking the right questions. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling against the table. Then tell me the truth. Who was the real target? He didn't hesitate. Your marriage. The words hit me like a gut punch. Your marriage was the real target. I stared at the man across from me, my breath coming in uneven waves. The diner's humming fluorescent lights felt too bright now, the air too still. Rachel hadn't just framed me. She hadn't just humiliated me. This was bigger. This wasn't about some petty revenge. This wasn't about me being an inconvenience to her family. This was about tearing my life apart from the inside. I forced myself to breathe. Why? The man tapped the edge of the table with his fingers. That's the question, isn't it? Frustration clawed at my chest. I don't have time for riddles. If you know something, say it. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. All right, Vernon. Here's what I know. He sat back, his voice dropping lower. Your wife isn't as innocent as you think. That email? That wasn't just some last-minute decision. This was planned for months. The timing was the key. You leaving that restaurant was just a bonus. It made you look guilty. But even if you hadn't left, it would have happened anyway. I swallowed, my throat dry. Why go after her own father? The man's jaw tightened. Because Rachel needed him gone. I felt the room tilt. Gone. He nodded. Your father-in-law had power, wealth, influence, but most importantly, control. He dictated everything in that family. Who they associated with, what deals were made, who stayed married. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. The way he said it, so matter of fact, made my stomach churn. I gritted my teeth. Are you telling me her father had a say in our marriage? The man exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Not just a say, Vernon. A decision. The diner walls felt like they were closing in. My mind replayed every cold stare her father had given me over the years. The way he had always treated me like an outsider, like I wasn't good enough. Had he tried to force Rachel to leave me? Had he threatened her? I shook my head. That still doesn't explain why she'd do this. Why ruin him? The man slid his phone onto the table, the screen lighting up. Because she needed to free herself from him. I frowned, glancing at the screen. It was an email chain. I skimmed through it, my pulse hammering. And then, I saw it. Rachel. Her father. A conversation. My stomach dropped. Rachel, you can't control me forever. I'm not your little girl anymore. Her father. You think you can do whatever you want? With that useless husband of yours? You think I'll let you embarrass this family? Rachel, you don't get a say in my life. Not anymore. Her father. I get every say. You are mine. And you will obey me. Rachel. No, Dad. Not this time. My hands shook as I scrolled further. A few emails down, she was talking to someone else. Someone unknown. Rachel, it has to be perfect. The timing matters. Unknown. He'll never see it coming. Rachel, neither will Vernon. My breath hitched. I set the phone down slowly, staring at it like it had burned me. Rachel had planned this. All of it. She had set her own father up, orchestrated his downfall, and used me as a smokescreen. But the worst part? She had lied to me for months. I looked up at the man. Who sent you this? He picked up his phone, sliding it back into his pocket. Let's just say. I know people. I inhaled sharply. You expect me to believe you just stumbled into this? His lips twitched. Let's just say, I have my own reasons for wanting to see the truth come out. I narrowed my eyes. Who are you? He tapped the table once, then stood. Doesn't matter. I clenched my fists. It matters to me. He paused, then sighed. You want a name? I nodded. He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. My name is Callum. I frowned. And why are you helping me? His expression darkened. Because Rachel's lies ruined my life, too. The air crackled between us. I felt my chest tighten. What? But before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Rachel. I hesitated, then answered. Vernon, she breathed, her voice frantic. We need to talk. Now. My jaw tightened. Do we? Yes, she whispered. Because you're in danger. Rachel's words sent a shiver down my spine. Because you're in danger. I gripped my phone tighter. What the hell does that mean? Vernon, I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered, her voice shaking. Please, just come home. We need to talk. I need to explain. I felt Callum's eyes on me. His jaw was set, like he already knew what she was about to say. I exhaled, forcing my voice to stay calm. Explain what, Rachel? How you framed me. How you used me as a cover while you took down your own father. Silence. Then, a quiet, shaky breath. You know. Yeah, I said, my grip tightening around the phone. I know. She inhaled sharply. Vernon, listen to me. You have no idea what my father is capable of. He controlled everything. He made me marry you, not because he liked you, but because he knew you were easy to manipulate. He thought you were weak, Vernon. But I knew better. My stomach twisted. What the hell are you talking about? Rachel's voice broke. I needed to get away from him. I needed freedom. And yes, I used you. I made it look like you were responsible so that he wouldn't see me coming. But, Vernon, I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh. Could have fooled me. Please, she begged. Come home. We can fix this. I need you. I closed my eyes. Once, I would have believed that. Once, I would have wanted to believe that. But now? Now, I saw things clearly. I had been nothing but a piece on her chessboard. She hadn't respected me, hadn't valued me, hadn't loved me. Rachel's father had treated me like I was disposable, and in the end, so had she. I opened my eyes and met Callum's gaze. He gave me a slow nod, like he already knew the choice I was about to make. I exhaled. Rachel? Yeah, she whispered. I stood, sliding my wallet from my pocket and placing a few bills on the table. You don't need me, I said quietly. You never did. Vernon. I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt free. Callum smirked. Smart move. I nodded, feeling lighter. I don't know who you are or why you helped me, but thanks. He shrugged. Let's just say, I know what it's like to be played by Rachel. That caught my attention. You knew her. Callum's smirk faded. I was her ex. The one before you. I blinked. And she did this to you too? He nodded. Not quite the same way, but close enough. She ruins people, Vernon. She always has. I swallowed hard. And now? His smirk returned. Now? She's on her own. I chuckled softly. Yeah, she is. I turned toward the door, inhaling deeply as I stepped into the crisp night air. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by trying to prove myself. I wasn't trying to earn love from people who never saw my worth. I was done. I didn't know where I was going next. But wherever it was, I knew one thing. I was finally walking away clean.